Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, unamulwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their librarians, their principal, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Ghana, Himalaya, wherever you find your podcasts. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We would also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. We have a fantastic online magazine. It is called Reading with Your Kids. You're going to find some fantastic writing in the magazine, great author profiles, cooking with your kids, recipes, STEM activities you can do with your kids, find out what games you can play with your kids. So much there on the Reading with Your Kids online magazine, and it is free, and it is available at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Michigan. Our guest is here today to celebrate her children's book. It's called Zora's Garden. Please welcome to the show, storyteller and Zora Neale Hurston scholar, Ray Chesny. Hey, Ray, how are you?
I'm good. A little bit cold. I wish I was in Zora's Garden down in Central Florida right now.
I agree. Wouldn't it be so nice to be able to hang out in the sunshine, record this outside amongst beautiful flowers?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound like a little bit of a storyteller there.
Well, I made my living for the past 35 years being on stage, telling stories through magic. So I understand the power of story and how a skilled storyteller such as yourself are able to really captivate the attention of kids. And I definitely want to talk about that, about storytelling. But before we do, let's talk about the story that you wrote. Let's talk about Zora's Garden. What's this book all about?
So Zora's Garden, funny enough, it actually started out as a physical garden during the pandemic. And so I have a little boy. He's 6 years old now, but we were working out in our garden that we started because of my research of Zora Neale Hurston. I discovered she loved to garden. So during the pandemic, we were stuck in the house like everyone else, and we needed something to do with our time. We decided to start a garden. And my son said, why don't we call it Zora's Garden? And so for a year, we were just working in this garden, working at this garden, and we would make up stories in Zora's Garden. It then went on to become a book, and the book is an analogy between storytelling and gardening. Little Zora is in the garden with her mom, and they need to pass the time. And so her mother is imparting this wisdom on the same way that storytelling is just like gardening. And so Zora kind of runs with it. And that's what I imagine may have happened in her lifetime as a little girl. And she goes on, the Zora Neale Hurston, to become a storyteller just like she does in the book for the rest of her life.
Wow. At first, hearing the idea of a garden being like a place for stories, but the more I think about it, it really is spot on. Because, a garden is a place where we tend the ground and raise these beautiful flowers that mean something different to everybody who sees them and experiences them. And your garden, it takes some care and some effort. And also, you have to kind of, at some point, be hands off and let the flowers kind of grow and be on their own. And the same thing with a story, every story means something different to whoever's listening to it. And we obviously have to work hard to bring our stories to life. But at some point, we also have to, as authors, as story creators, be able to sit back and say, okay, story, take me where you will. I'm not quite sure where we're going, but I'm excited to take the journey.
Absolutely. I love the beginning of this journey of Zora becoming a storyteller because her mom tells her, which the mom in the book is named Lucy, after Zora's real mom, Lucy Hurston. And she says, a story is like a seed. It starts with a small idea. And that's really true. And I think about, as a gardener, you start with this small seed and it grows until it's miraculous.
Yeah.
It's magical. You see this tiny seed and you're like, how is all the things that we need for it to develop into a plant and fruit and to multiply? How is it in this tiny little seed? But it happens every time.
Yeah.
And in my experience, it's just like that with storytelling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about somebody that you obviously have a great deal of affection for, Zora Neale Hurston. Tell us a little bit about this icon in her life.
Yeah, so Zora was the most prolific Black woman writer in her time. She was a part of the Harlem Renaissance, which is considered the greatest Black artistic movement in history. It occurred in 1920s in Harlem, New York. And at that time, it was very uncommon for women to be able to make a career out of writing. And in fact, any of the other women who were a part of the Harlem Renaissance, they effectively became wives or nurses or teachers, but Zora actually died writing. And so she, for me, is such an icon because it required lots of sacrifice. It required lots of sacrifice. Most people know Langston Hughes, the poet from the Harlem Renaissance, and he and Zora were best friends and shared a patron during that artistic movement. Zora was actually the most prolific during the Great Depression, which I consider quite a feat. She, in her lifetime, published 7 books.
Wow.
7 books, with the majority of them being in the 30s. Aside from being an author and a writer, she was a playwright, but she was also a trained anthropologist. She was trained by Franz Boas, who's considered the father of American anthropology. And he started the School of Anthropology at Columbia University. And so in 1927, Zora was on this grand adventure around the American South to collect cultural artifacts of Black people and people from the African diaspora. She was a 2-time Guggenheim Fellow. She went to Jamaica and Haiti in 1936 and 1937 doing the same thing. And in fact, she wrote her most celebrated text, Their Eyes Were Watching God, which was just featured as a Library of Congress Books That Shaped America in partnership with C-SPAN. Wow. She published that in 1937.
Wow, that's incredible. And this was done, we talk about the racial inequities that exist today. Back in the 20s, that was even greater. What was it, do you think, that gave Zora the resilience and the determination not only to write books, but also to become an anthropologist at a time where, and again, we talk about how difficult it is for women to get into the STEM fields today. 100 years ago, it was so much harder. Where do you think she got that strength and resiliency from?
So one thing I will say is, being a mom and writing and working with children, I think some people are just born that way. To start, they're born that way. She came here and she was a woman ahead of her time. But Zora grew up in the first all-Black incorporated municipality in the history of the United States, which is Eatonville, Florida, only about 6 miles from Disney. So next time you go to Orlando, you can stop by and actually see Zora's hometown, which is a historic town recognized by the government still today. And so that town was founded in 1887, and Zora's father happened to be one of the pioneering individuals involved in the founding of that town. He wrote some of the town's laws that are still in place today, and he served as mayor 3 different times. But Zora was born in Nottasuga, Alabama, which is only about 4 miles from Tuskegee Institute, which was founded by Booker T. Washington. When we think about schools of thought, even during the Harlem Renaissance was the artistic organ of a political movement. And the question in this political movement was, how do we move Black culture forward after this period of enslavement? And so Booker T. Washington was saying, you need to be economically sustainable and solvent. He followed the bootstrap method, if we want to simplify it. But then you have W.E.B. Du Bois, who Zora was in contact. Even he would come to her housewarmings during the Harlem Renaissance. And his thing was, we need to fight for these rights. But Eatonville, Zora's hometown, was also founded on the philosophies of Booker T. Washington. So Zora was always pushing to establish herself. And even though she wasn't able to truly do it financially, this idea of being resistant, but a self-starter, of having pride in self, that is at the base of who she was, at the base of who her family was. And on top of that, she had this wonderful mom, Miss Lucy, who had been a school teacher before she became a mom. And she used to educate. Zora was one of 8. And Miss Lucy educated all of her children until she couldn't educate them anymore. And then that went over to the oldest brother, Hezekiah Robert. And so these children started going, the Hurston children started going to Hungerford, which was located in Eatonville, which was the first school for Black children in Central Florida. It is right in Zora's hometown. And Miss Lucy always told the Hurston children this one simple phrase. She said, jump at the sun. You might not reach it, but at least you would get off the ground. And that's evident in Zora's life. She spent her life jumping at the sun, saying yes to life, speaking up for what she believed in. And that's why we celebrate her. But in her time, she also suffered quite a bit for it as well.
I love that phrase, jump at the sun. That's inspiring. I am definitely going to be sharing that with not only the young people in my life, but a lot of old people who need to get up off their butts and start jumping. Hey, what was it? When did you discover Zora, and what was it that first drew you to this amazing woman?
Yeah, and I think this is all my parents and educators lean in, because at first I was really ashamed of this. Their Eyes Are Watching God is in over 23,000 classrooms, I believe, around the United States. And so it's one of the most celebrated texts when we're looking at the literary canon. But when it was assigned to me in my AP English class in high school, I actually did not read the book. And it's right behind me. I actually did not read the book. In fact, I had grown up as a very reluctant reader. Now, I was proficient in reading, but I was a reluctant reader because when I was growing up, I didn't see many characters who looked like me. And I was like, where are the books with the cool kids who look like me, who get to go on cool adventures? And so it was kind of my act of resistance. The other piece of it was that I love to come up with stories, but it wasn't encouraged. It wasn't encouraged because, of course, we say, hey, consume other people's stuff. But when we look at a child, we think, well, how smart could they be? And I'm here to spoiler alert, very intelligent. Children come here as geniuses. And so it wasn't until I had my son at 28 that I discovered Zora Neale Hurston, or I'll say she found me. And she kind of reached out and grabbed me because I had started a program in Detroit, Michigan, where I'm from. And the idea was to use storytelling to allow children to learn how to craft stories to create their own interest and engagement in literacy. So Michigan State found out what I was doing in that program. they decided to partner with me. They would send their students to after school and summer camp, and they even started running the program after I trained them on this model, which is highly adaptable. Well, the professor, Kevin L. Brooks, he said, you're good with your students, K through 6, 120 of them. You're great with my students who come to run the program. Why don't you come to campus and be a part of the Black History series that I'm starting? And I said, okay, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, the person who most inspired your career as a writer. But at that point, I was still a reluctant reader. But he said these magical words to me. He said, we will pay you an honorarium. And then I said, I feel inspired. It's coming back to me. I'll figure it out. I can always talk. That's not a problem. And I actually picked Langston Hughes because the king of the Harlem Renaissance, the most famous, it's the famous Black artistic movement. Of course, I should pick someone from the Harlem Renaissance, but I truly only knew Langston Hughes. Knew mom. I figured I could brush up on some poetry. But as I was researching him, Zora kept popping up. She kept popping up. And I was thinking, oh, they were best friends during the Harlem Renaissance. How come no one talks about Zora? Oh, she was raised in the first all-Black incorporated municipality, which means legally established town. They got to pay property taxes. They have their own post office. They have their own government. They have their own laws. How come no one told me that? Her dad was mayor 3 times. She comes from a family who had land in Alabama where they grew clingstone peaches. Where is this in history? I said, why is no one talking about Zora? And then I looked myself in the mirror. I said, why aren't you talking about Zora? And so in that first presentation, I actually did Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, which I was sweating every time I would say and Zora, because I believe spiritually she was probably whispering in my ear like, I dare you. You're doing what's been done to me all of this time. I'm an afterthought. I'm an and. And as I was talking, as I was doing a presentation, I said, if I ever get to do this again, Zora will be the star of my show. And she really has been ever since.
Well, that is a beautiful, honest story. I really appreciate your honesty. It's like, oh, I'll find my inspiration. Going to give me some money. Cool.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Look at motivator.
I can't tell you how many times people have called up and said, hey, do you have a show that addresses absolutely? And I hang up the phone and I write that show.
Yeah, and I will tell you just a little Zora tidbit. She actually did that. Zora, if she would have had her choice, she would have been a playwright because she was always in this position of needing money, right? She said that a novel, and I can tell you I write across genres, working on novels, long form storytelling, it is, woo, it takes a lot of dedication and you can't do much of anything else. And so she had put on a play at Rollins College in Winter Park in 1933 called From Sun to Sun. And it got a lot of attention because, of course, we had this Black woman putting on Black theater on what is considered at the time a progressive white campus. And so it attracted a lot of people who did want to see progression made and some who were just curious. Well, it got the attention of lots of publishers because Professor Edwin Osgood Grover, who was called the Professor of Books, he started rallying for people to know who Zora was. And publishers started reaching out to her and they said, hey, Zora, you got any, have you been working on any novels? And she needed some money. She said, yep. And she had not.
Well, I find I am honored to be in such good company. Hey, we should take a minute because we have a lot of authors and aspiring authors that are listening to the show, and they all want people to read their books, but so many of them are thinking, I'm going to do school shows and I'm going to be in front of kids. And for a lot of them, they think, I'm just going to go and sit in a rocking chair on a stage and read my book. And that's going to catch the attention of the kids. And they are absolutely wrong. It doesn't matter how good that book is. It needs to be more than just sitting and reading. And so can you take a minute or two to talk about being a storyteller and what you need to do to really take a book reading and turn that into a dynamic storytelling experience?
Yeah, I would say anytime you're working with children, the rule of thumb is children are not made to sit down and be quiet. If you want to engage them, you have to be engaged with them. So even from the point of designing your book, think about things that they can recognize when you're talking to your illustrator. A garden is something that most children can recognize. So as you're reading, bake in moments where you can have them get up and identify different things in the pictures, even make sure that they're counting different things. And that works really well to build confidence and engagement. Even Zora, she did that with adults, right? So most of us, I know the adult attention span is constantly decreasing. We don't want to admit that, but it's constantly decreasing as well. And she would play her harmonica or guitar, or she would loan it out. And so when she would have her storytelling sessions, they would start with or integrate music, right, to captivate the audience. One of my rules of thumb is any activity that I'm doing with children, including reading, is not about finishing the book. It's about them being engaged. Mm-hmm. If you work with audiences that I work with, which are historically underserved and underrepresented groups, a lot of times they've already had negative experiences with books. I'm in Michigan where kindergarten is not required. So those foundational skills that we learn in kindergarten, even listening to directions, they may not have that. You have to be there to serve the audience. Make it about them, not about the book, right? So I'll give you guys one of my favorite things I always do, because children get really excited. And for me, it doesn't matter if they're calling out and everything, but I want to make sure they're respecting each other. So when I start, I say, okay, Miss Ray has these special ears on, and her ears only hear when she calls on you. If you're talking, the ears just turn off. And so I say, if you have something to share, I really want to hear what you have to say. So raise your hand so I can give you all of my attention. And they actually eat that up, because I'm saying, without saying, hey, you have to raise your hand. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, I really want to, and it's true, I really want to hear what you're sharing. I want to be able to focus and give you my undivided attention, because what you're saying matters that much to me, right? And so if we take more time on one page sharing, because Zora's Garden is a 52-page book. Mm-hmm. That's a long children's book. It's not a standard children's book. And so for them, if they have that experience, one of the things I bake in, I always ask sites, a lot of times I will waive my fee if they purchase a copy of the book for each child in the audience. Mm-hmm. I never want them to have an experience with the book and then, or anything that I do, and say, and now you can't do it. Right. Now you can't do it. I like to package even the readings with a hands-on activity. So with each copy of Zora's Garden, even if you buy it and I don't get to read it to your kiddos, you get a packet of seeds so you can start your own garden.
That's beautiful.
I'm not going to show you a child anything and say like, and now you can't do that.
Right, right. I love that. And I love that little trick. And some people listening to this, especially somebody who's aspiring to be out in front of an audience, because I've heard this. I have my own little trick. I go out and I purposely don't get a big introduction. I just walk on stage and start talking. And because kids are curious, they all start to listen. And, they quiet down. And I just use that. I'm like, oh, my goodness, what a beautiful audience. Most times I have to get up here and the principal has to say, shh, quiet, quiet, quiet. But I just walk on stage and I say hello and you guys listen to me. What a beautiful, respectful audience. And so that making the connection that I want to hear you. I respect you. You are so important. Me saying, oh, you're such a beautiful, respectful audience. When we were down in El Salvador and I was performing with Clowns Without Borders, one of the things we said was, hey, I'm not special because I'm from the United States and I came here and you should be impressed by me. It's like, hey, I came from the United States to meet you because you are so important. And I just think some people might think that's cheesy, but I think it is just such a great idea to tell somebody right up front that I'm here, I love you, I want to know you, I want to get to know you. It's kind of what I did when I met my beautiful wife.
It works, and it's funny because I even do this with my adult audiences. When I go out, I'm the most unexpected Zora Neale Hurston scholar you will find. And no one is more surprised I'm a Zora Neale Hurston scholar than me. In fact, my love of her started because I just wanted to find a writer who resonated with me, who had success, but who told the truth of their life. And Carla Kaplan, who I consider my fairy godmother when it comes to my work, she edited 600 letters that Zora wrote.
Wow.
Right? And so I say it's equivalent to someone going through and reading your text messages because it's everything. It's her communication and correspondence with her business contacts, but it's also the messy stuff with her friends. And so when I go out and I present, I'm always trying to connect. You talked about connection, connect even my adult audience to Zora. So when I sit down, I say, hey, this is a conversation. I want you guys to ask all the questions that you could possibly have about Zora, because I can talk about her until I'm blue in the face. But I want to connect her to you. What do you do? What do you love? So a lot of times I forget I'm there to present. I'm just having conversations with people.
But that's what people want. We want to interact. I mean, that's why podcasting is such a powerful medium right now, because you're sitting down and you're kind of involved in a conversation. Our listeners can't ask questions, but they can listen in, and we're right in their ears. And it sounds like that's something that you do with your audiences. You get right into their ears, but also into their heart, which is so very important. Hey, Ray, we should know where we can go to get into Zora's Garden and find out more about you.
Yeah, so you can actually head over to raychesny.com. That's RAECHESNY. And you can see all of my Zora offerings for adults and children. For children-specific programming, I have a program where children can learn my process for creating stories. And I have a team that turns them into professionally illustrated books just like mine. You can also purchase Zora's Garden from there, along with Common Core aligned teacher companion guides. And that is juniorstoryteller.com. I am on social media at raychesny.com, Ray Chesny. I was going to say raychesny.com. But I'm also over a lot on the Zora Neale Hurston Trust Instagram at Zora Neale Hurston Trust. And I'm providing all types of facts and insights about Zora, and I can proudly say that I'm the resident scholar for the Zora Neale Hurston Trust.
That is wonderful, and there's so much more. We just scraped the surface, so I hope that you'll come back sometime in the future to talk maybe about a new book, but also talk more about Zora.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Zora's Garden, a storyteller and Zora Neale Hurston scholar. Our guest has been Ray Chesny. Ray, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here in the show, and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by Reading with Your Kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.